Welcome back, everyone. Now, this afternoon, I have a great interview coming your way. It's with a man whose opinions won't always align with my own and probably yours as well, and who comes from the opposite side of the political spectrum. And in all honesty, we probably have very little in common when it comes to our political alignment. However, he is a man I respect and a man who I believe, like me, wants unity. And of course, it's always good to talk. RUWAN UDUWERAGE-PERERA is a former police officer, national international police trainer, advisor, an activist on equality, diversity, and community engagement issues. He was also the first elected General Secretary of the National Black Police Officers Association. And today I'll be asking him some very pertinent questions I think you're going to find very interesting indeed. So, RUWAN, welcome back to the show. It's been a while. And of course, there's been a lot of water, some good, some bad, passed under the bridge since we last had the pleasure. Of course, not least, we've got a new Labour government under Keir Starmer. So we're going to get straight into it. Going to sling you in at the deep end. My first question is, what do you make of his job so far? What do you make of Keir's first few weeks in charge?
Well, when Labour want to turn up and govern, I'd be very pleased.
So I gather you're not too impressing.
The government has inherited the economic situation we're in. Having said that, so I can understand certain things, but when it comes to their response to things such as the pensioners' heating allowance, etc., I do not understand that at all. Again,
it's not a very Labour-like thing to do, is it?
It's not really. And their viewpoint on policing, well, I'd like to know what it is, because they've clearly got a viewpoint on health, education. But one of the most important things in society, i.e. policing, law and order, they seem to have just, well, what is their policy?
That's a good question. So let me take you, I think what the viewers are going to find really interesting, because they know, and most of my viewers know, and in the intro I said that we come from, in many ways, opposite ends of the political spectrum, but you're someone that I respect as a man and as a friend, I hope.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested to hear your views from potentially an opposing side. So let me take you back to the riots.
Yes.
The incident at Manchester Airport. And because I think that is where this story potentially for today begins. Let's go back to Manchester Airport. I know it's an ongoing investigation, so we're limited as to what we can talk about.
Yeah, sure.
But let me ask you, where do you think this all started?
Oh, I think the current issues, the current problems we've got predate any of those. They go back many years now. We've increasingly had governments that have ignored the public. We've got, if you go back to when Conservatives actually got a huge level of support, they had support from people who either hadn't voted previously, or if they had previously voted Labour, or potentially also UKIP, etc.
Yeah.
And they made many promises, certainly in the north, and they went back on every last one of them. So I can understand totally the discontent that exists. I think it's shared by many people. And they're obviously on top of, over the last 14 years or so, we've had governments where rather than doing, they have been placing blame elsewhere.
Yeah.
The migrant issue, it was actually better pre-Brexit, and we've made a complete, if you don't mind me saying, pig's ear of that one.
Oh yeah.
We're not tackling the causes whatsoever. We seem to prefer to have a punch up with France over who's responsible. It's a mess. It's a mess. And the public have been fed this drip, drip, drip of it's someone else's fault. So the trigger was a number of things that led to the riots. But I think the riots disorder was inevitable.
Yeah, I mean, it came. I don't suppose it came as a shock to many people. I think the quick way in which it developed was certainly rather surprising. For me, I think I agree. Look, I do agree. This is an issue that goes back a long time, and I agree wholeheartedly. We're going to have to be careful here how much we actually agree on. I agree wholeheartedly that previous governments have not listened. And I think one of the things that I said during a video shortly after the riots was that people are starting to feel that they cannot comply their way out of this.
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of the problem. There was a lot of people thinking, well, look, I've been complying for years and nothing changes. I think the rioters actually did everyone a lot of harm. I think the mainstream media were very unhelpful, but we're really here today to get your opinion. What did you make of Keir Starmer's reaction to those riots?
Well, I'll go step slightly. The response from the police was a policy that had actually been implemented under the Tory government. So the policy of dealing with it was very much along the lines of, and it's a police tactic now, called clear, hold and build. And basically clear means removing the source of the criminality, deviance, etc. Hold means maintaining. Once you've cleared, you then have police officers there to maintain. And then allegedly there's meant to be then the build aspect, which is the rebuilding of the social infrastructure in order to tackle causes. Yeah. So we've certainly seen the clear, i.e. very much a very heavy-handed approach.
Too heavy-handed, you think? Too heavy-handed, would you say?
Riots are riots. Once something is a riot, then it should be tackled robustly, swiftly and robustly. But as the principles of policing go, it should be minimum force all the way through. It should only be whatever force is necessary to deal with it. We certainly saw cases of rather impressive policing. We also saw the opposite. But let's say what we've seen is the policy of clear, hold, build that came under the Tory government. Actually, interestingly, it's a military tactic. First used in Malaya when it was clear, hold, build, but hearts and minds. So you go in, deal with insurgency, work with the local community, rebuild the community, and thereby the insurgents don't come back. Now, I'm not sure how the public feel about a military strategy, used by the British police against the British public. I personally have got concerns about that.
I think from a layman's viewpoint, I didn't really see what I would class as any particular overly heavy-handedness by the police from a physical viewpoint. What I did witness was arrests being made for things that I felt personally were very menial. You know, I saw a 70-year-old grandmother being arrested, handcuffed. I think the British public are going to find that very unpalatable. I think when it comes to violence, you're absolutely right. A riot's a riot. And they should be dealt with accordingly. Having said that, I've got friends that spent time in riots in Northern Ireland back in the 70s. And they said, blimey, Paul, You think that's a riot? That was
Oh
a
yeah. No,
that was a skirmish, you know. But I think that Keir Starmer's reaction to those riots. I mean, I want your opinion. He labelled everyone as being far right. He said these are racist, far right rioters. How do you see that?
Well, certainly there were members of far right were there, but not all members attending were and involved or have certainly been arrested and banged up. Certainly, no, they weren't all far right.
Yeah.
An awful lot of people were basically wound up by other agents. Some of them whom were abroad, British, but abroad. But clearly there had been that drip. The level of disinformation following on from the absolutely horrendous Southport murders, but the levels of disinformation that came out immediately afterwards that was exploited by certain influencers and politicians, etc., was absolutely terrible.
I thank my lucky stars, Ruwan, for a bit of advice that I was given years ago when I was working for Mohammed Al Fayed.
Yeah.
And they told me that you never report on anything officially until it's been made official.
Yeah.
That's something that I learned. And when I saw that message, that we know which one we're talking about, the message where the guy in Lahore, I believe, has been arrested and charged for. When I saw that communication, as soon as I saw it, I initially, my gut instinct said, do not touch this. Do not post it. Do not share it. Do not touch it. And thankfully, I didn't. But I could have been, in my ignorance, I could have been guilty of passing that on. Thankfully, I didn't. But what a price I would have paid, and what a price people have paid for that.
Yes. And part of the, obviously a strong message has been sent out. I don't necessarily agree with the strong message, but it's a message that's been sent out by the government and these police, the courts, etc. I'm not actually supportive of it. It's interesting that the original influencers, nothing's happened to them.
Which do you want to name those influencers?
Well, I think there's a certain gentleman in, is it Romania? Andrew Tate, who really ought to learn to stay stum when...
Rein it in a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I don't agree with his views anyway, but he was a complete agent provocateur. He wound people up. He's got a large following of excitable young men, and he certainly played his part. A certain politician and leader of the Reform Party played his part.
Let me just stop. Can I just come back? And Andrew Tate, I must admit, I didn't watch any of his videos during that time. I've never really been a follower of Andrew Tate. I've never really, I can honestly say, I've never really watched a lot of his content. I don't know why. It's just not someone that particularly I'm resonating with. But Nigel Farage, I want to pick you up on that one. How do you square the circle of Nigel Farage being, if I'm getting you right, that you feel that he provoked some of those events?
He doesn't quite realise yet his responsibility as a member of Parliament. And there are places to ask comments, to ask questions.
Questions, yeah.
Okay. And he could have asked the questions he asked within the House. And if it's within the House, it's protected. And you can ask certain questions, but to throw out a question, I'm only asking, which is basically he was inciting problems. and then hiding behind, well, I'm only asking a question.
Could we use another word, insinuating? I mean, I have a bit of a problem with the word incitement, but I mean, maybe I don't understand it properly, Ron. But to me, this is just I don't know, maybe I should look in a dictionary, but to incite someone, you have to openly encourage someone to go out and do something, don't you?
No. Nigel is a student of history, and he is very, very good at following the playbook of politicians of the past. He will come unstuck, because up till now he's never been. The European Union and our Parliament are two different things. There's a huge amount of responsibility that is on an MP that was not on an MEP. And so he actually will potentially find himself in hot water if he carries on the approach that he took previously. He has responsibilities to just be far more restrained in his comments.
Okay. Let me go back to that then.
Yes.
If we've got to the stage, Ron, this is something that I think has worried a lot of YouTubers, myself included, a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of comment. I mean, if I've always understood that as a so-called influencer, and I don't particularly like that word, but as a so-called influencer, you do have a responsibility.
Yes.
And you should always be mindful of that. But have we got to the stage now, or are we getting to the stage now? In fact, we are at the stage now where people are actually frightened of talking, frightened of asking questions, frightened of voicing their views and concerns. That to me is a big problem.
It's partially to do with sort of education, etc., hasn't caught up with media as of today. So the internet and certainly different social networks have sort of galloped on ahead, and people haven't actually kept up with it. Now, the British rules around freedom of expression it's not the same as the United States of America. Freedom of expression in the United Kingdom comes with that rather big word called responsibility.
Yeah.
But an awful lot of people now engaging in social media don't seem to understand that bit. They seem to think they call themselves a journalist, and so they can ask any question. Well, the reality is even a journalist can't do that. There has to be responsibility has to be demonstrated, and a large percentage of some of the threads I've been watching, that responsibility is not being shown. And certainly people like Nigel Farage, Andrew Tate, they have not demonstrated that.
It's very interesting. I mean, I wouldn't, as I say, Andrew Tate can't really comment because I haven't watched him. I personally didn't take Nigel Farage's comments as being necessarily inflammatory. You've explained it in a different way that I kind of understand, but it does still leave the burning question in a lot of people's minds. What are we allowed to talk about? Now, one gentleman was sent to jail, and part of his crime that was printed in the paper and spoke about by the judge was anti-establishment rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you could accuse the leader of the opposition probably every time he stands up in the House of Commons of anti-establishment rhetoric, because what that actually meant was anti-Labour rhetoric.
Oh, do not think that the response that Labour actually followed through with after the riots would have been considerably worse under the Tories.
You think so?
Oh, yes. The police response was not that of Labour. It was tactics that were drawn up under the Tories.
No, I'm not really talking about the police response. I'm talking about the judiciary, the swift of people. I mean, look, you're on here because you have an opposite, often have an opposite, but I have to say it as I see it, and you can put me right. What we saw a stream of people that were fast tracked through court.
Yeah.
With, in my opinion, from what I can see, horrendous advice probably from duty solicitors to plead guilty. And, you know, my guess is it was, look, plead guilty, take a fine, go home. What they got was plead guilty, go to court the next day, and you're away for 18 months. So I saw fast-tracking courts, extremely hefty sentences. I mean, we have a 60-year-old man in prison right now for singing a silly song.
Yep.
Now, this is supposed to be a free society. We have the right, or I think we have the right, to offend people as long as it's not threatening or, you know, grossly abusive. And I have said this time and again, I do not approve of that song. I think it's unnecessary. I think it's disrespectful. And I think it winds people up when you don't need to wind people up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it a jailable offence? I think if it is, we've hit a big problem, because there are plenty of other people out there who say things. I mean, look, I've been called a fascist and a Nazi. My grandfather lost an arm fighting fascism. I find that very offensive, but would the person be arrested and sent to jail? Not at all.
Well, in certain circumstances, they could find themselves.
But I very much doubt they would.
But it's about certain circumstances. So we'd have to go through each and every arrest to find out which one's more questionable. We have to remember that immediately after the Southport, the murders, number one, the Muslim community was wrongly identified as the villain.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
A mob, because that's what it was, then descended on the mosque. Now, had the police not responded robustly, what would the mob have done?
Yeah, you won't have any arguments from me.
No, I know I'm not. We had a situation where an asylum hostel, former hotel, was attacked, and thugs, the mob, again,
tried to set fire to it. Yeah.
Now,
these are inexcusable. Inexcusable.
So what we had during those riots, and I can understand why the government and the police responded as they did to a degree. It was literally a case of a mass of disorder, and frankly, we don't have enough police officers in the country. And we wouldn't want that sort of numbers of police officers to be able to deal with a riot in every city or every town. We don't live under a police state. We don't want to live under a police state.
Some might argue with that.
Well, yeah, some will argue. Yeah, they will, absolutely, and I'm sure I've argued that in the past as well. But the point being, we don't want to. That's not where we want to be. So the government was faced with, and the police service was faced with, sporadic incidents going up all over the place. Interestingly, of course, they didn't happen in Scotland. There were sort of issues in Northern Ireland and minor issues in Wales. It was predominantly in England, the issues, the disorders. But I've got to say, I was expecting it across the border into Scotland.
Would that be, Ruwan, because England has predominantly taken the brunt of the illegal migrant situation?
Well, I won't use the word illegal, but like the migrant issue, yes. That will be certainly part of it.
You've just set the comment section on fire.
I know I have, because I'm sorry, they're not illegal migrants until they're found to be illegal. Just because Suella Braverman and the previous Tory government literally invented new laws, it doesn't make it right.
So what you're saying is, just for the viewers' benefit, I think what you're saying is, you're innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely.
That's what you're saying. I think that might calm them down a little bit, because I think one or two of them are probably ready to implode.
There we
listening
go.
to you say,
You're absolutely right.
I'm going to stick to presuming their guilt, and I'm going to call them illegal migrants.
Absolutely.
Because they come into the country without a passport. I know that when I come into the UK back from holiday, I can't come through without a passport.
Nope.
And I won't get a hotel room. So anyway, that's by the by. So look, for me, I think when we talk about the reaction, I haven't got so much of a problem. In fact, I don't really have a problem with the reaction of the police in most instances. I have a problem with the justice system, the way that a lot of these people were dealt with. And by the way, I've also said this on numerous videos that I've said. I feel sorry for the Islamic community as well, that were wrongly duped into believing that the EDL were coming. And I don't believe that was ever the case. The EDL are a defunct, dead organisation. And again, I'll give you my opinion, and I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah.
I believe that the media resurrected that organisation in the minds of people up and down the country, which brought gangs of Muslim lads onto the streets, some brandishing weapons, many of whom are also now sitting behind a cell door somewhere. That could have been avoided if the Prime Minister and indeed the media had taken a more, what's the right word, sensible, a more mature, less dramatic lead in what was going on. Instead of the Prime Minister saying, look, guys, look, I understand your concerns. We are going to deal with this. We're not going to mess about. If you go out there and riot, throw bricks, you're going to jail. But we understand why you're angry. We've just lost 3 beautiful angels. I understand that you know, migration is a concern. But instead of that, he called everyone far right, and the media followed that up by resurrecting an organisation that hasn't existed for 10 years, scared the life out of the Muslim community, and we saw the end result.
I thought the stating that the EDL was suddenly resurrected, I thought that was just completely bizarre. Unfortunately, what happened there was, I think it's sloppy journalism.
Dangerous journalism.
Sorry?
Dangerous journalism.
Well, it's sloppy and dangerous, yes. Because, as you say, the EDL has not been active for a decade. Now, the EDL certainly had links with, again, far-right organisations.
Yeah.
And some of those organisations certainly were involved in what was going on in August. So, but it was wrong to actually resurrect the EDL. Now, that should have been fact-checked early on. Again, I would say it's a responsibility of the police, who know full well whether the EDL is active or not. They should have come forth and said, actually, no.
Yes, they should have done. And interestingly enough, and this is not a defence, any defence of the EDL, this is an actual fact. As far as I know, you might be in a better position to tell me, but the EDL were never, ever classed as a terrorist or far-right group by the police, officially.
Right, okay. There's a bit of mythology going around about what the EDL was classed as. It was never classed as a right-centrist organization. Okay, it came from, as Tommy talks to himself, it came from the football hooligan aspect.
Football lads,
Football lads. I mean, one of Tommy's, his uncle or something, was one of the founding members of the Luton group. So that's where it came from. At the same time, in the far-right football hooliganism in Britain, and also overseas, has got links into other far-right organisations. Tommy himself was former BNP. He was former Pegida, which is a European far-right organisation. and he's been a member of a number of other far-right organisations. Some of them for a short period of time, I'll give him, but he has been a member.
Yeah.
So the links with the far right and EDL are quite clear.
They're clear. Go on. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, sorry. And clearly the presence of the far right and the views of the far right were being expressed during that period.
See, I would agree with that, but I would add the caveat to them in a minority, in the respect that, I mean, the analogy that I issued the other day was this, is that, look, if you go to a West Ham versus Millwall football match on a Saturday afternoon, there's going to be some fights, there's going to be some drunk people, there's going to be some racists, there's going to be some hooligans, but that isn't the 45,000 people that are at the game. It's a very small minority of people. When the media did what they did, I mean, we talk about responsibility. We spoke about agitating and riling people up and being responsible for what they say. For me, there are journalists right now that should be getting far more scrutiny from the law when it comes to agitating than anyone else that I know, because I firmly believe, and nothing will change my mind, that there are Indigenous British people in jail right now. There are people from the Muslim community right now that are in a cell because the mainstream media wound them up into believing that they were at war, when actually the nation should have just been grieving 3 young girls together. And the misinformation that initially came out was appalling. The person concerned has been found and he's been charged. Ironically, he's from Pakistan. And I just feel that everyone from both sides has been stitched up to a large degree by the media. Because every time we turn the telly on, every time we listen to a news broadcast during that month period, all we could hear was far right, far right, far right. And if they want to build the far right, the way to do it is to keep telling everyone they are far right. That's my view.
I'll agree and disagree on that last bit, but because yes, if you tell someone they are X long enough, then they could take the attitude of sod it, I might as well be.
Might as well be it. That's what I meant. Yeah,
they could well take that. But we live in a society that in 1 minute wants to talk about personal responsibility, and we all have rational thoughts, etc. And then we acknowledge that actually people can be wound up.
Yeah,
they can be hoodwinked by the disinformation, misinformation, false claims that were circulated, etc. And the blame somehow is not theirs then for their actions. Well, alas for them, it is, because that's how the law sees it. Now, yes, there were people, clearly there were agitators, and the media, I think the media across the whole thing didn't come out of it very well. I mean, I was following the social media. I was following things like Talk TV and GB News, etc. And some of the outlandish comments being made on those programs that
by the presenters.
Was just despicable, absolutely terrible. Now, there clearly is not enough, I don't want to use the word enforcement, but guidance, etc., for these newer news outlets, because they need to be far more restrained. I'm not against having people like Talk TV, GB News, and even more nutty than that. I'm all up for that, okay? Because it is about freedom of expression, but it comes with a responsibility.
Would you say that channels like Sky News and the BBC have a responsibility, who clearly come from the opposite end of the spectrum? For an example, when we saw Sky News reporting from, I think it was Birmingham,
Yeah.
And they suddenly become surrounded by a group of men, some carrying weapons, I believe. I think they removed that video within about 15 minutes of it going live. Now that to me shows, and to the watching world, shows a narrative, shows a bias, and is unhelpful.
Well, the police have to deal with a riot. At the end of the day, when dealing with riots, civil disorders, etc., people get away with all sorts of things because, frankly, there's not the personnel to arrest them all.
Yeah.
And in order to calm things down swiftly, you have to at times ignore certain things. So if you can actually remove them from the area. And that
I was talking more about Sky News. I was talking about Sky News's reaction. Like when it was let's be blunt. Let's be really blunt. When it was the indigenous population doing something wrong, they were all over it like a rash. When it was the other way round, they simply removed the footage from their website. They hid it. They played it down, and people aren't stupid. They see this. And again, we go back to that word responsibility. I think all the British public want is a level playing field for everyone.
Well, it's never been that. I mean, I'm sure it's going to come up, but the whole concept of two-tier policing, the vast majority of the people involved in the riots, along with the Muslim community who were the target of the riots, have experienced two-tier policing their entire existence.
Yeah, that's possible.
Actually, they both experience the same kind of two-tier policing. They're both policed rather than the police.
I suppose they might say it's our turn.
Yeah, they may well do. But the point being, actually, that two-tier policing it does exist, but it doesn't exist in the manner to which some people are now using that term.
What do you make of footage of police officers asking members of the Muslim community to take their weapons back to the mosque and we're here to protect you? What do you think the optics are on that for the wider public?
Well, if I say in a riot situation, if you can clear people of the streets in a quick and safe manner, that's what you got to do.
Do you see them doing that with a bunch of football lads?
Well, I know they've done that with football lads.
Take your weapons back to the football stadium, or
I wouldn't know of a police officer or former police officer who hasn't at some point said to a group of lads, etc., I suggest you turn around and go.
That's different. Yeah, that's different. No, I'm going to go. I want to draw you on this one because I think that they're going to want me to. A police officer was seen asking some Muslim lads, and this, by the way, any Muslims watching this, I'm not having a pop at you guys. I'm having a pop at the police.
Yeah.
Right. So this is not personal, right? It could be anyone. When that police officer said to those Muslim lads, boys, do us a favour, take your weapons back to the mosque. Mm-hmm. The optics are horrible.
I'm not saying the optics aren't horrible. Of course, it looks bad. But the point being, was it good policing? I would suggest getting them out of the way so they don't commit an offence was worth doing.
Hey, I'll go along with that.
And that would be whether they're a Muslim group, an indigenous white group, etc. You just want to get them out of the way. I
go along with that, and I see the sense in that. My belief is if it was the other way around, that wouldn't have been their response.
No. If you look at, you would have looked at vast amounts of clips as well as I have, and there's many examples where police officers have clearly done that on both sides. They've just got rid of people. They've tried to put some cautious thought into someone's head ASAP to get them out of the way.
Okay,
and that's good That's good.
No, that's good. I want to, look, we could carry on with this all day, but I've got a list of questions here I want to get through. So going on to that issue of potentially softly approaches with one community and a different approach to another.
Not that I've agreed with that.
No, yeah, absolutely. Not. Again, this isn't targeting anyone. It's just something that happened, and I know that people want me to ask you, what do you think of the optics of police officers from, I think, 3 different police forces opening up their statement to address the public the next day in Arabic?
Well, I think it's rather odd, given the fact that most Muslims in the UK may understand Quranic Arabic, but they do not speak Arabic. So I would find that rather odd.
I'd say naive. I'd say very naive as well.
I would say rather, yes, naive, etc. I certainly would add that as well. Well, I'm not sure if I would say naive. No, I'm sorry. It should not. I've been involved in policing, in the training of police officers with regard to equality, diversity, inclusion, etc. for many years. Multi-million pounds has been spent on this. Bags of research. That's plain ignorance to believe that a young lad, an 18, 19, 20-year-old, let's say Pakistani young man in one of those cities, well, they were born here, weren't they?
Yeah.
Their first language is English.
Yeah. They'd have been better off saying, listen, lads, this is the deal.
Of course it was. There weren't, if any, there weren't large numbers, if any, Arabic people present to be spoken to in that way.
Yeah. No, I think, and again, I go back to I go back to the age-old one of trying to unite people. I don't think that helps unite people. It divides people, because what you had that day was hundreds of thousands of people around the UK looking at those police officers and saying, "Are you for real?"
Well, of course, yeah. But we both have to remember also that the media it's a business. It's there to make profit. It's not it's not the BBC, etc., but certain other media are. And so not showing certain things, or showing things that are sort of inflame the emotions, is clickbait.
Yeah.
It sells papers, as they say.
Yeah.
There would have been, and it has been picked up on, the number of individuals who try to calm things down on both sides. Communities that have actually crossed over and worked together, that's happened. But of course, that doesn't sell papers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Division does sell papers.
Now, there'd be people watching now saying, "Oh, Paul, you should have pulled him up on this. You should have pulled him up on that." But look, we've only got about an hour. We're not here to argue. We're here to have a debate. Ruwan is perfectly entitled to his opinion, and I enjoy listening to it. I don't always agree, but I enjoy it. But we've got a big one now coming up, which is probably maybe a little bit more up your street, actually, the Notting Hill Carnival.
Yep.
Your views on the events of this year's Notting Hill Carnival would be appreciated.
The fact that there were so many incidents of crime, etc., is appalling. But you then have to. This isn't an excuse, but it's a reality. When you bring together that size number of people in an area on a hot sunny day, where people are where we will have used differing intoxicants to keep themselves happy, etc., you're going to get problems. There's going to be problems. Now, that's not an excuse. That's just a reality. With moving forward, I mean, I would very much want the carnival to carry on, Notting Hill Carnival to carry on, but it's obviously got to carry on in a different way.
Something needs to happen, doesn't it?
Something needs to happen, and that's about the organisers, the police, the council, etc., etc. They're all working far more closely together.
Yeah, okay. I'll point out. I mean, look, I actually agree with what you're saying there. I don't want to see it cancelled particularly. I think it's an event that if they want to do it, good luck to them. If they can keep the peace. But I think my main issues with Nine Hill, the carnival. I mean, you say about, look, with those vast amount of numbers, there's going to be problems. I would point out, and I know this because I've been there on many occasions. It used to be where I lived, down at a place called Ardingly, which is on the Surrey-Sussex border.
Sure.
There's a 2-day show at Ardingly every year on the same weekend as the Notting Hill Carnival.
Mm-hmm.
Roughly the same amount of people attend each event. The carnival has a few more, probably about 15 to 20% more people through the gates. There has never, ever been a stabbing or a murder at Ardingly show in the 35 years that it's been taking place.
Yeah.
So whilst I accept your argument, it doesn't quite work out that way for me because, as I say, I think Ardingly is a perfect example of different behaviour.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to talk about was how the police described it afterwards as a beautiful event. 3 people died.
Well, there were over 300 people arrested, 3 people died.
55 police officers injured.
Yeah, and it's estimated 2 million people attended.
And the police described it as a beautiful event.
The event can be beautiful without the individual problems being beautiful.
Would that, I mean, look.
I think it's daft language.
You're right, but he's playing with words, my friend, right?
Well, of course.
When there's 3 innocent people that have died, one of them a young woman, a mother. When 55 police officers have been injured, some quite seriously, that is not a beautiful event.
No. I mean, it's not language I would use.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is 2 million people. It's fantastic that 2 million people over 2 days come together to celebrate, etc. That's absolutely fantastic. But the fact that 3 people died and the number of people arrested, assaults, etc., etc., etc. I mean, that's just appalling. That's appalling.
Is that not a riot?
No, it's not a riot because obviously a riot has to be. There's certain definitions for a riot, and it wouldn't fit that one.
Yeah, legally it doesn't fit.
No, it doesn't. Fit. But certainly, I think there's certainly a place to say that the organisation of it needs to be far more effective.
Yeah, I was going to say, I watched one video where they had those barriers where you go through, like at the airport, when if you've got something metal, and everyone was just walking down the side, just completely avoiding the barriers. And I thought, well, what's the point? The barriers are there to protect people from potentially knife crime. And that, I think, we'll probably finish up with knife crime as well, because I know we're both quite passionate about that. But if the organisers are going to let people skip down the side, I mean, when I go to Gatwick or Heathrow, I can't get to security and go, oh, I'll just take the shortcut through the side and avoid the body search. Crazy.
Yeah. If you're going to have security, then have security.
Yeah. So on the knife crime situation, Ruwan, where are we at the moment? Because, I mean, mate, I had a video here of a young white lad in Brighton a couple of weeks back riding the back of a bus with a 18-inch machete in his hand. We've seen the machete attacks, the knife crime attacks that just seem to be growing by the day. It almost seems. I mean, where are we at?
Well, firstly, I think our response. I mean, I'm going to say we need to be tackling the causes.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe, and I know you agree with that as well. This current demonization of bladed, a knife.
Bladed articles,
bladed articles. There we go. The reality is, the vast majority of assaults involving a knife, it's a kitchen knife. It's all about accessibility. But people are a bit like with the comment about the EDL being the cause of the riots. People have jumped on this zombie knives routine. Well, most deaths are not caused by such things.
Yeah.
No, we've got to, that's why I say we've got to go back to tackling the cause. We've got to go back to why does someone feel they need to be carrying a weapon when they go out on the streets. We're not going to ban all knives.
No, it's ridiculous. Yeah,
it's just plain ridiculous. It's not the same as firearms. But in the USA, if we were in the USA, it wouldn't be knives, it would be firearms. It's all about accessibility. We've got a problem where specifically young men, and it's not about, there's no ethnicity aspect to this. There's certainly socioeconomic, i.e. poverty, etc. But young men are being drawn into gangs in some of our cities and other areas, and they are being exploited, without doubt. We're talking about areas where the only role model in that area happens to be the drug dealer, the head of the organized crime area, gang, etc. We've got to tackle the cause.
I mean, that's a bigger question. I mean, I actually agree with you. I think that, you know, the cause is the biggest problem. Education, I think, as well at times, and peer pressure, I think, is massive.
Absolutely.
Peer pressure is massive, and it's heartbreaking to see so many young men on the street losing their lives. I think one thing that my viewers will want me to ask you, and I think it's a fair question, is there an issue? Like you said, it's not a race thing, but is there a cultural element involved?
There will certainly be some cultures where the preference of the weapon is different. But again, that's about accessibility. But is a culture more likely to, well, an ethnicity is not likely to, but yes, a subculture is likely to. So not a wider culture, but a smaller subculture is likely to.
Yeah, subculture. That's a good word, subculture. Yeah.
So subcultures within certain cultures are attracted to doing certain things, yes. But that's not anything to do with those individuals' ethnicity.
Yeah, no, I'll go along with that. Yeah, it's a question that I wanted to ask, because I think what we see is we see patterns.
Yes.
And I think sometimes people are afraid to talk about patterns, which is of no help.
Well, no, if they want to talk about patterns, I'm all up for it. But they need to look at the wider pattern. So if you look at knife crime, gang-related knife crime in the UK, you will see it comes from certain socioeconomic categories, groups, and that's an irrelevance what their ethnicity is.
Are you saying, let's be clear, are you saying poor people, basically? People with, okay.
I'm talking about people who over the last 2 decades have basically been ignored. Their quality of life was crap before, if you don't mind me saying, and it's got worse. They're seeing the them and us increasing. They're seeing their chance of succeeding in life getting smaller and smaller, if not no hope whatsoever. As you know, I work in the East End of London as well. And I was only a few months back, I was with a young guy who runs a fitness club. And I know Dan is very up for this as well. And I think it's a brilliant idea. He runs a boxing fitness club, etc. And he literally can't get the finances to run it. Yeah. Now, where are those predominantly young men going to go if they're not going to his club? And the reality is, they'll be out on the street.
On the street, yeah. No, I agree with that entirely. I agree with that.
Yeah,
I
and
agree
so
with you
we've
entirely.
over 2 decades, we've had a reduction in social services, education, youth clubs, funding for youth clubs, etc. All those positive things where young men specifically learn the skills of being an awareness about being a young man. Not always good stuff, but predominantly. But equally, they've got role models there who can check them. And we've seen the positive role model aspect decline because there's nowhere, there's no funding, there's no support, etc.
I think that's across all communities.
That's what I'm saying. That's across all communities.
Yeah.
Now, when you're talking about certain estates or certain areas in large cities, where I was talking in Stratford not long back, and I was talking to a youngster who was in his early 20s. He could count on one hand the number of times he'd been outside of London. He actually could tell me virtually over the last few years the number of times he'd left the Newham area. That's appalling. We're talking about people they're living in one area and they never leave it, and their experience in that area is absolutely awful. They believe they're living in a war zone because
that really is living in a bubble, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, well, we've seen the government ignore the youngsters in recent years. We've seen them ignore the sick and the NHS for years. Well, this week we can throw the elderly in as well.
We can, and obviously it worries me because I'm getting closer every day to that one. And I live in the area with the highest fuel bills.
Not a good sign, mate. Not a good sign. Not a good sign. Ruwan, it's been brilliant having you on again. I mean, I know that it's always good when I have you on because I can always guarantee a very high comment section. It's not always complimentary to me or to you.
No.
But I hope that everyone that watches this will have enjoyed it at least. If there's anything you wanted to add before we go, please feel free.
I'm as I know you are, I'm into how do we create the solutions to the problems we've currently got. And so I'm keen to hear from people as to what they think. For example, what should community policing look like in the UK in the 21st century? What do they want of their public services, policing, etc.? Because I don't think, well, in fact, I know nobody's asking. Policies and strategies are being developed with no consultation whatsoever. Absolutely no consultation. And the thing about the police service in the UK, it is the police to the public are the police. We have a civil police service.
I've got to tell you, mate, I think if you went out there today and did a nationwide poll amongst everyone, I think a lot of people feel that it's completely the opposite. We no longer feel that we are the police. We feel that the police are, in many cases, frankly, against us. That's just the feeling.
That has to change. But I'm saying that has to change.
Yeah.
And I'm very much hoping that the government, when it's got its feet slightly more under the table, actually realizes it needs to review policing. Do we want to have a civil police system carrying on that long tradition since 1829, or do we want a police service that is every day it's withdrawing from the community and we are being policed rather than we are part of it?
I think that's a very good. Yeah, I think that's very, very much so. Very much so. Well, we do feel like we're being policed.
Well, if the communities are feeling that, and I know they are feeling that, then actually, again, that goes back to, that's why I say at the very beginning, the communities who were the ones feeling threatened by the riots, and a large percentage of those involved in the riots have got far more in common than they have not.
Do you know what? Do you know something? I did a live stream this morning, and this is the deal, right? You see, what we ended up with is we ended up with a load of indigenous Brits in prison. We ended up with a load of Muslim lads in prison. The best thing they could have done with all of those people, instead of throwing them in jail, they should have took them to the local community centre, made them all a cup of tea, got them to sit down together and have a chat. They might not all have agreed, but at least they wouldn't have been kicking lumps out of each other at the end of the afternoon. Or maybe I'm just naive.
Well, I'd like to say I would go along with that, and I hope ultimately that happens. I very much I'm not into a society where cohesion is created through fear.
Yeah.
Because the fear that certain communities are now feeling is wrong. It's wrong. People should not be afraid to have a genuine discussion with someone, ask a genuine question. They should not be fearful of that. That clearly is the case. Now, but there again, they're also being wound up by people who are telling them.
Yeah.
And those people need to be dealt with.
Yeah.
They need to be held responsible as well.
Yeah, I understand.
So I think there's an awful lot of agents who are playing with us. Actors is the other term. We have to make sure that we don't play to their tune or dance to their tune.
That's a great way to end it. The only thing that I would like to add there is that as an ordinary, how can I put it? As an ordinary bloke, I'm not super duper educated.
Yeah.
I need to know, I need to understand, and perhaps I need to learn what is the line. And I'm sure a lot of people will understand this question because they're probably feeling the same. What is the line between asking a question and agitating? Where is the line? How do we define that line?
Well, I think
or moaning. Sorry, Ruwan, or moaning. So, for an example, if I want to go on the internet this afternoon, have a good old rant about something.
Yeah.
Where is the line between me having a good old-fashioned rant and stirring up trouble?
Well, I can remember as a kid going to Speaker's Corner and you'd have a rant. Okay. That's not the same anymore. Obviously, it's changed. But
just a bit.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. But the reality is, if someone's asking, okay, it's easier to do it the way how it shouldn't be done. When someone is posing a question and hiding behind the question and it's inciting trouble. So I'm only asking. So the guy, Nigel asks about the murderer.
Yeah.
Well, I'm only asking if he's on a terrorist list. I'm only asking if he's Muslim. There was no evidence to support any of that. But that statement, I'm only asking, was clearly disingenuous.
Okay. So what you're saying is I remember an old one from years ago when someone was telling me about journalism. They said, if you want to accuse someone of something, you actually say or insinuate they're not guilty of it, because that automatically makes everyone think he is.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, as a young police officer, I would say to my sergeant or whatever, of course, if I said what I was thinking about you at this moment, you would discipline me.
Yeah.
Have I said anything wrong? Well, of course I have. You know, I was saying it to be cocky, wasn't I?
Yeah.
I was trying to incite a situation. So when clearly the statements are being made to incite, it's wrong.
What about when people are, just for an example, just not educated enough to understand what they're saying? I think there were a lot of people on Facebook in particular that got themselves into trouble for posting things that, quite honestly, they're just a bit thick, and they should, you know, and not, you know, I just maybe I'm a big old softy, but I don't care where they come from or what they look like. I feel sorry for people that are sitting in jail now that really don't belong there.
No, frankly, look, I don't agree with sending people to prison in the main anyway. And we've now got the prisons are bursting.
Not so much now, but
Well, they're still bursting.
Yeah.
But
they're a bit thinner this week. Yeah.
This week. But we're still at the top end of the prison population, and there's far too many people in prison. And those of anyone who's been to prison knows that prison is not the place to send most people, because there is no education aspect. It's bang 'em up, and actually you're more likely to come out more skilled in committing a crime than anything else.
Yeah.
So because there isn't the education bit, the atonement bit's gone, etc., etc. So we don't want people going to prison. And a lot of the people that you've spoken about, should they have gone to prison? In my heart of heart, I would say no.
Yeah.
But the government's response was, I'm stamping down on this, and I'm stamping down on it heavy. Before, they clearly had a genuine fear, or they thought they had a genuine fear that things were going to escalate even further.
Yeah. Ruwan, brilliant to have you on, mate. I mean, it's been a great hour and 10 minutes. Normally I say, look, 35, 40 minutes is the peak period, but we could just go on all day. Thank you so much for coming on again. Really appreciate it, my friend. Have a good time up there in wherever you are. And let's look forward to a cold winter. I think it's going to be cold. We better get our heating allowance sorted out, mate.
Well, it drops to -15 where I am. So.
Oh dear. Ruwan, thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All the best.
Okay, bye.